Throughout this course, we will go over the web development setup and cover the following of the basics in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, giving you the essential tools to create beautiful and interactive websites. You will apply everything you learn by building your very own web developer portfolio. We will also dive into important developer practices, including how to test your code, use version control with Git, deploy your site to a server, and optimize your website for better performance. By the end of this course, you will not only know how to build a site from scratch, but also how to ensure it runs smoothly and professionally. I'm so excited to guide you through this journey, and I can't wait to see you succeed as you take your first steps into the world of front-end web development. Let's get started and create something amazing together. Let's start by setting up our web development environment by downloading a web browser and a text editor. For our web browser, we will use Google Chrome, primarily because of their handy web developer tools. If you are using a Mac, we will open Safari. Otherwise, open any web browser on your computer. In the search bar, type in Google Chrome, and then click this first one. Here you will click Download Chrome, and complete the steps to finish installing it. Then let's open Google Chrome. For our text editor, we will use Visual Studio Code. In the search bar, type in Visual Studio Code and click this first one. You may click here to download it on Mac, otherwise click here to download it on your computer. When that's finished downloading, let's click to open it. This next step is optional, but if you would like to use the same theme that I used, then I will show you how to install it on your Visual Studio Code. On the bottom left corner, click the gear icon and click Extensions. In the search bar, type Morgan Codes, and click this first one to install it. And then click on Set Color Theme. Let's go over the basics in HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is the standard markup language for creating web pages. Let's create our first HTML file. First, we will keep things organized by creating a folder on our desktop. Right-click, select New Folder, and name the folder Code-Practice. Let's open this folder in Visual Studio Code. From here, go to File and click Open to open the folder. I will close this Welcome tab. Now on the left, we can see that the folder is open on Visual Studio Code. When we hover the name of the folder, we can see these little icons. Let's click this file icon to create an HTML file called index.html. Index is the name of the file and .html is the file type extension. Now that we have our HTML file, I will quickly change the indentation to a tab size of 2. This just helps to make the code more readable as we go. HTML Starter Template. I will go over the basic framework of building a web page. On the first line, we will add the doctype HTML tag. This tells the web browser about the HTML version being used. In this case, it is the latest version, HTML5. On the next line, we will add the HTML tags. Visual Studio Code will typically add the closing tag when the opening tag is added. Press the Enter key to create space in between. Inside the HTML element, we will add the head tags. Right under the head tags, let's add the body tags. Inside of the opening HTML tag, we will add the language attributes. This is to specify the primary language of the entire document. Inside of the quotation marks, we set the value to EN. This stands for English. Inside of the head element, we will add meta tags. Meta tags provide information about the HTML document. The first tag is the meta charset tag. This is to specify the character encoding. UTF-8 stands for Unicode Transformation Format 8. It is a character encoding standard that can represent virtually any character in the set. Next is the meta viewport tag. This one is crucial for creating responsive web pages. It tells the browser how to control the layout of the web page on different devices. Right below, let's add the title tags. Inside of the title tags, we will put the title of the web page. This title will also appear on the web browsers tab. Let's dissect tags and attributes in HTML elements. Elements in HTML start with an opening tag. The opening tag begins with a less than sign, followed by the name of the tag, and then closes with a greater than sign. The element closes with a closing tag. The closing tag starts with a less than sign, followed by a /, then the name of the tag, and ends with a greater than sign. The content of the HTML element goes in between the opening and closing tags. For example, in our code, we have this opening title tag, the closing tag, and the contents in between. This is an element in HTML. Now let's go over attributes in HTML elements. Attributes essentially give more information about the HTML element. They are added in the opening tag with the name of the attribute, followed by an equal sign, quotation marks, and the attribute value goes inside the quotation marks. For example, if we look at our code, this lang is an HTML attribute that contains the value of en. Here we have another attribute in this meta tag, and here we have two attributes in this meta tag. Let's save this file in VS Code by going to File and click Save. Alternatively, you can use keyboard shortcuts. If you are using a Mac, you can save the file by pressing and holding Command and clicking the letter S. Let's take a look at the HTML document locally in our web browser. Open Google Chrome, go to File, and open the HTML file. We can see that we have our HTML file open because the address bar has the URL that shows the local file path, and the tab has the title of our HTML document. Text formatting HTML elements. Let's go to our HTML document and add content inside of the body element. First, let's add an h1 tag. This h1 tag is one of 6 heading elements in HTML. In here, let's type hello world. Then let's go to our web browser and click here to reload the page. Here we see our content being displayed on the web browser. The h1 tag represents the main heading of the web page. It is the most important header element, and for SEO purposes, there should only be one h1 element per web page. Let's look at the other header elements. These other elements can be used more than once in a web page. The h2 element is used as a subheading of the web page, usually supporting the main heading. The h3 to h6 elements are lower levels of subheadings that we use to further organize content if needed. When we look at this on the web browser, we can also see the default styling of each header element according to their importance. Now let's clear this up and add a paragraph element with the text of "This is a paragraph." We use paragraph tags to ensure that the text is organized into readable paragraphs. Using this sentence as an example, let's make the word paragraph bold by adding the B tags around the word. You can also replace the B with the word strong to make the word bold. To make the text italic, use the letter I. You can also use EM. EM stands for emphasis. To make the text underline, use the letter U. These are just a few examples of text formatting HTML elements. Let's create HTML lists. Let's start with an unordered list. We create an unordered list with UL tags. UL stands for unordered list. And inside, let's add 3 list items with the LI tag. We use this kind of list when the order of the items are not so important. An unordered list will have a disk bullet point by default. To create an ordered list, instead of UL, we will change this to OL. OL stands for ordered list. We use this when the order of the list items are important, and on the front end, they will show as a list with numbers. HTML links. In HTML, a link is created with an anchor tag and has the href attribute with the value set to the URL or resource to go to when the link is clicked. For example, let's add the URL for Google so that when the link with the text of Visit Google is clicked, it will go to that website. Other attributes that we can include in the anchor tag is the title attribute. When the link is hovered, the title of the link will show. Another attribute that we can add is the targets attribute. By setting the value to _blank, this will open the website in a new tab on the web browser. Creating a form in HTML. Let's create an H2 heading with simple form. To create a form in HTML, we will add the form tags. This will wrap all of the form elements within. Each input field will have a label, so let's add a label tag for the name. This links the label to the corresponding input field. For the label, we will type name. Then create the field with the input tag and add the type attributes with the value of text. This allows the user to enter text and an ID of name. This links the input field and its label together. Then add the name of name. This is used when the form's data is submitted. Lastly, we can add the required so that the user must fill out this field when submitting it. Under that, I will add break tags to separate each element in its own line. Typically, I would use CSS to make this cleaner, but it is also good for us to go over break tags. Now we can copy and paste the label and input to create the fields for the email and for the message. For the message, instead of an input, we are going to use a text area element. This will have 4 rows of 50 columns. Now let's add a submit button. We can use the button element for more versatility, but for this case, using an input field is much simpler. For this one, we add a value of submit. In the form's opening tag, we will add the action with a hashtag as a placeholder. I put a hashtag, but typically this has a URL to where the data of the form will be sent to. Then add a method of post. The post method means that the form's data will be sent securely to the server using the HTTP post method. Now let's take a look. This is how a simple form with no styling looks like. Let's just add another break tag under the message label. If we click the submit button, notice that the first required field is giving me an alert to fill out the field. This is because we added a required on that input element. To make this form functional, we can add server-side endpoints with JavaScript, which is considered backend. In this course, we are only focusing on the front end. FYI, when it comes to websites for marketing, most clients prefer to use email solutions like Jotform, Constant Contact, or MailChimp. This would easily be implemented with an embed code to display the form on the web page. Adding an image with HTML. Let's add the image tag and include the src attribute, which stands for source. Since we don't have the image yet, we'll leave the value empty for now. Next, let's add the alt attribute, which stands for alternative text. This attribute is used to describe the image. For now, I'll put cat because I want to put an image of a cat here. When we view the web page, we'll notice the alternative text with an image icon. This happens because we haven't linked an image to the source yet. Let's grab a free image on pexels.com. In the search bar, I will type cat and grab this one to download it. Let's minimize our browser window, open the code practice folder, and put the image in there. Let's also rename the file to cat.jpg. Now let's close the folder. On our VS Code, we can also see that the image is in our code practice folder. Let's open the browser and add the image source in the image tag. The image is in the same place as our HTML documents, so we just type the file name of cat.jpg. Let's save the file and take a look at the web page. Right now, we can only see the cat's ear because the image dimensions are larger than the browser's window. We can fix this with the width attribute. Let's set this to 100%. This means that the image will be 100% to its container horizontally while maintaining its aspect ratio. We can also use different measuring units like pixels. Let's give this image a width of 500 pixels. The image will always stay at 500 pixels even when we resize the window. We can also add a title attribute. Here I will add cat photo. So when we hover the photo, we can see the title of the image. We can also make this image into a link by wrapping it inside an anchor tag. For the URL, I will put a cat website to keep it relevant. Tables in HTML. Let's add a header tag of simple HTML table. To create a table in HTML, first we will add table tags to wrap all of the HTML table elements. Then we add thead tags. This represents the table's head. Within thead tags, we use tr tags to define the table rows. Instead of this table row, we will use th tags to add table headers. For this first header, let's type in name. Each table header represents a column in the table row. Let's create 2 more headings. Let's name this one age and this one country. Under the closing thead tag, let's add the tbody tags. These tags are used to contain the main contents of the table, such as rows of data. Let's add a table row. Inside, add a td tag, which stands for table data. In here, add a name, then add another td tag to set an age, and another td tag to set a country. Now let's practice creating 2 more rows inside the table's body with different information. Now let's take a look. By default, we can see that the table headings are in bold, and there are 3 columns and 3 rows of data in the table's body. This is how we create a simple table in HTML. Divisions in HTML, also known as divs. A div is an HTML element which stands for division. Let's create an h1 tag with the word divs. Below, let's create 3 separate divs and naming each of them as div1, div2, and div3. To see this better, let's give each div a different background color by adding the style attributes. Then add the property of background-color and set the value with any predefined color. Now we can see each division container better by setting its own background color. We can also add division tags within division tags. Let's add another division tag within the first division tag and give it a background color of light yellow. I just noticed I forgot to add a semicolon for the light green div. Although the browser will still render it, it is always best to add the right syntax. Here, we still can't really tell that the light yellow div is inside of the blue div. So let's give the light blue div a padding of 25 pixels. Now we are able to see this structure better. Divs are generic containers and are non-semantic, which means that they do not convey meaning about the contents that it contains. As a web developer, you will see divs everywhere. Semantic HTML elements. Unlike division tags, semantic HTML elements are tags that provide meaning to the content that it contains. When developing web pages, we always structure the code from top to bottom. You can think of it as building blocks. Typically, if the web page has navigation, I would start with nav tags, an unordered list of the menu items and the logo and other navigation content would go inside here. Then continue building the structure with header tags. In here, we can include the h1 header tag and other necessary content. Then include main tags. This is where the main content of the body will go. In here may contain 1 or more sections depending on the layout. We can also include the article tag, which is usually used for blog article content. Additionally, if the web layout has site content, we can add that content inside the aside tags. Lastly, we can add all of the footer contents, including copyright information, inside of the footer tags. This is a basic yet simple example of semantic tags and its structure. In this lesson, we will go over the basics in CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. We use CSS alongside HTML to style HTML elements. Let's explore 3 common ways for adding CSS to HTML. One way is called inline CSS by using the style attributes in the HTML tag. We have seen this in previous examples where we add the style attributes in the opening tag of an HTML element, along with the property and the value. For example, let's add an h1 tag with the text of adding CSS to HTML. To change the color of this text in inline CSS, we need to add the style attribute with the property of color and set a color. I will use blue-violet. Let's take a look at the front end and refresh the page to see the color update. Internal CSS is another way of adding CSS to HTML by adding the style tags inside of the head element. For example, inside of the style tags, we will target the HTML element. This is known as a CSS selector. Then add an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. Inside of the curly braces, we will add the property and value for the selected HTML element that we want to style. Each property and value pair is called a declaration in CSS. Using the previous code, let's add the style tags in the head element. Let's target the h1 element as our selector by typing h1, following the curly braces. Inside of the curly braces, we will add the property of color and set the value to blue. To clean this code, I will remove the inline CSS on the h1 tag. Now let's take a look at our changes on the front end. External CSS by using the link tag in the head tag. This is the best way to add CSS to HTML because it keeps all of the styling in a separate file. Let's remove the internal CSS. In here, we will add a link tag. The rel is an HTML attribute which stands for relationship. Set the value to style sheet. Then add the href attribute and set that to style.css. This refers to a CSS file that we will create now. But first, let's go to the page and reload it to clear the styles. Click the file icon to add a new file called style.css. In our style.css file, let's target the h1 selector and set the color to hot pink. The color updated, which means that our link tag is properly connected. When developing a website, it is best to keep the CSS file in a CSS folder, just in case we need to add more style sheets later on. Let's create a folder called CSS. Now click to drag the CSS file into the CSS folder. Now that we changed the location of our CSS file, we need to go to index.html and change the href value to css/style.css. CSS selectors on classes and IDs. In HTML, we add CSS classes to the opening tag of an element. Classes are useful for using the same style for multiple elements or targeting specific elements to add their own specific style. To set a class, we use class quotation marks with the name of the class for that element. In CSS, we target the class by adding a period, the name of the class, following the CSS syntax to set the styling. In our HTML document, let's add 3 paragraphs. Now that we have 3 paragraphs, let's add a class to the last paragraph. Let's give it a class name of blue-text. Now let's go to our CSS file and target the class name by adding a period blue-text and setting the style to a color of blue. When we reload the page, we can see the paragraph turns blue. Let's see what happens if we add styling to all of the paragraph elements. Let's set the color to chocolate. Notice that all of the paragraphs are brown except for the one with the class of blue text. This is because of CSS specificity, which means that in this case, the elements that are styled with a class will take more importance when the same element type contains styling but does not have a class. With classes, we can reuse the same class name for multiple HTML elements inside of the body. In CSS, IDs are added similarly to classes. In the opening tag, we add the ID attribute, followed by the =, quotation marks, and the ID value in between. While you can include dashes in the name, it is also common for ID names to use camel case formatting. Camel casing is used widely in web development, especially in programming languages like JavaScript. Essentially, camel casing is adding a bunch of words into one, with the first word being lowercase and the rest of the words being capitalized. We target ID selectors in the CSS syntax by using a hash symbol followed by the ID's name, curly brackets, and the styling for that ID. Let's put this into practice by going to our HTML file and add 3 sections using the section HTML tag. Let's give the third section an ID name of section-3. Let's save that, and in our CSS file, let's style each section element with a height of 100 VH, which stands for the section to take up 100% of the vertical height of the browser. Let's give the third section a background color of burly wood. Then go to the web browser to check the changes. This is how we add styling to an ID element. A special purpose that ID elements have is that we can use them in anchor tags to create links that go to specific areas of a web page. For example, in our HTML file, let's add an anchor tag with the href value to point to the section 3 ID. And for the text, add go to section 3. Let's reload the page and click the link to go to section 3. CSS box model, and explore the Google Dev Console. In the H1 tag, I will add box model example. The CSS box model is a fundamental concept in web design and layout. In this lesson, I will also show you how to easily view the box model of any element in the Google Dev Console. In CSS, we can think of every element as a rectangular box. Let's add a div with the text of box model. Then go to our web browser and reload the changes. Then let's go to our CSS file to create styling for a class that we will add to that div. The class name will be box-model. For the styles, we will set a width of 500 pixels, a padding of 25 pixels, a border of 3 pixels with a style of solid and a color of black, a margin of 10 pixels, and a box sizing of border-box. We use border box to create a consistent layout in terms of how elements are measured and calculated. In our HTML file, let's add that class name to the div element. Let's reload the page and see how the styles were applied. Let's add a background color of light blue to see things a little bit better. Let's open the Google Dev Console by right-clicking, click Inspect, click the Inspector tool, and click the div element with the box model class. Move this up to see the box model provided below. Here we can see the height and width measurements in pixels. The browser will highlight each area of the box model. Here we can see the padding, border, and margin of the elements with the styles that we used for it. Every HTML element is essentially treated as a box model. CSS text properties. CSS has so many properties for styling an element. In this lesson, I will go over a few most used styling properties for text. Let's add an H1 tag of CSS text properties and values. Let's go to the CSS file and target the H1 tag. But before adding styles to it, let's look at the default styles in the Google Dev Console. Click on the Inspector tool, click the H1 element, and under styles, we can see the default styling that the browser sets for the H1 element. Now let's go back to the CSS file and add the color property to set the text color of blue-violet. Another text property is the font size. Let's set this to 62 pixels. Let's add another property of text align and set it to center. We can also use right. By default, elements are always set to the left. Another property we can add is font weight. In this dropdown, we can see all the different values that we can use. 100 is the lightest and 900 is the heaviest. Let's leave this at 300. Let's add a property of letter spacing and set the value to 1 pixel. Let's change this to 3 pixels. In the Google Dev Console, we can make changes to see a preview on how things will look before hard-coding it in our CSS file. Reload the page to see our actual CSS styles. Another property that we can use is text transform. Let's set this to capitalize. Here we see that each word is capitalized. We can also use uppercase and lowercase. To use a specific font, we add the property of font family. In the dropdown, there is a list of different kinds of fonts. To add a font, we can click any of these or type out apostrophes with the name of the font. In this case, I will type out Courier New following a comma and a backup font of monospace. This type of font gives typewriter vibes, but we will also see this often when the content is written in code. Another common font is Arial. This is a sans serif type font mostly used on modern websites. And another font family is Times New Roman. This is a serif type font, and it is usually used as the default font family on most, if not all, browsers. CSS backgrounds. In this lesson, I will go over most commonly used background properties and values. Let's start with a div and give it a class of bg-cat. Then target this class in the CSS file and give it a property of background. Here we can also use background-image. The difference between these two properties is that with the background property, we can either add the image or color as the value, whereas background-image, we can only set an image value. Let's set an image for this class in the background property by typing URL opening and closing parentheses, the closing semicolon, opening and closing apostrophes, typing the // This means to locate outside of the folder that the CSS file is in, and then type cat.jpg to select the image. Then let's set height and width properties with a value of 800 pixels. Let's see how this looks. Let's update the height to 500 pixels. Here we only see part of the image because the original dimensions of the image are larger than our height and width. Let's open the Google Dev Console in case we want to see any previews. One way to fix the image so that the image takes up the height and width dimensions that we set is by adding the background size property and giving it a value of cover. Another value to look at is the contain value. This will contain the entire image in the element, no matter the height and width that we set. This will also repeat the image to fill the width of the container. Another property we can add is the background color property. Let's set this to blue. Now reload the page to see the styles. The reason why we do not see the blue background is because we have a background image and the color is hiding right behind it. In our Google Dev Console, we can quickly check this by unchecking the background image declaration. We can play with this more to see how things would look. For the width, I will set this to 100%. Then give this a background size of contain. To prevent the image from being repeated, we can use the background repeat property and set the value to no repeat. Here we set the image to be contained in the element based on the height and width, remove the default repeat value, and since the element is set to 100%, we are able to see the background color because of the size of the image and the size of the element based on the size of the browser. CSS borders. In our HTML file, let's add a div with a class of border-example. Then in CSS, give the class a style of height to 400 pixels and a width of 400 pixels and a background color of Alice blue. Let's change this color a bit darker to see it better. In VS Code, we can hover this little box and add any color we want. RGB is just one of a couple of different ways to represent color in HTML and CSS. Now let's add a border width of 5 pixels, a border color of black, and a border style of solid. In the browser, we can see the black border and all the other styles that we gave to the border example class. We can also set different border styles like dashed or dotted. In the Dev Console, you can preview these other values as well. Let's add a border to the image by adding the border style property and values or using the same border example class. We can also add a border to text HTML elements. CSS properties display, position, and z-index. Let's go over some display property values. Create a div with a text of display block and a class of d-block. Let's copy and paste this element for display inline. And paste the elements again for a display inline block. And a last div element of display none. Now let's go ahead and style each of these classes with a different background color. For the class of d-block, let's add the property of display with the value of block. This property value is used to render elements as a block level element. Typically, they start on a new line and take up the full width of their parent's elements. In this case, the parent's element is the body element. Some default block level elements include divs, header tags, paragraph tags, lists, and semantic tags. It's also good to know that we can manipulate any element to be block level. For the next class of d-inline, we will give this a display property with the value of inline. When we reload the page, we can see that the width is only as big as the content inside of it. Inline level elements do not start on a new line, and if the surrounding elements are in line, then they will flow together on one line. For the d-inline block class, let's add the display property with the value of inline-block. This element combines both inline and block aspects. It will render as an inline level element in terms of not starting on a new line, and it will act as a block level element in terms of being able to add a width, height, margin, and padding while respecting the current surrounding elements. For example, if we add padding to an inline level element, we can see that this element is going over the surrounding block level elements. This can be unpredictable and may not be ideal for structuring a design. If we add padding to the inline block level elements, we can see here how the styling looks nicer in respect to the surrounding elements. Let's remove the padding on the inline element just to show how this element is being automatically centered vertically next to essentially taller elements. For the last display example with the class of d-none, we will give it a display property value of none. This will hide the elements on the front end, but if we take a look at the dev console, we can actually find it in the source. Now let's go over the z-index and position properties in CSS. Z-index allows us to display elements on top or behind each other. The position property in CSS allows us to control how it is positioned in the web page. First, let's clear our CSS and HTML files and reload to refresh the web browser. In our HTML file, let's create 3 divs. The first div, let's put the number 1 and give it a class of z-1. The second div, a class of z-2 with the number of 2, and the third div, a number of 3 with the class of z-3. In our CSS file, let's give each div a different background color. Let's add a height and width to each class. And also set a display of inline-block so that each block will go in line next to each other. Now let's see how z-index is used. On the z-2 class, we will give this a margin of -150 pixels. This will make it overlap the blue box. And give the class of z-3 the same margin of -150 pixels to overlap the red box. Let's go to the web browser and open the dev console. By default, we can see that the preceding div will overlap the one before it. The yellow overlaps the red and the red overlaps the blue. We can easily change the order of overlapping with the z-index and position CSS properties. For example, for the class of z-2, let's give that a z-index of 2 and a position of relative. Then let's go back to the web browser and reload the page to see the red box overlap the yellow box. Now let's have the blue box overlap the red box. We do this by adding the same code, except for z-index, we will put 3. The elements with a higher z-index number will always stack on top. We can practice more by adding the same code to the z-3 class and set a z-index of 4. Now let's delete the styles and HTML divs to go over new examples for the CSS position property. Let's create a div and add the text of I am an absolute element. Then let's give it a class of e-absolute. And in our CSS file, give it a styling of a pink background and a height and width of 300 pixels. Now let's add the position of absolute. The default position is to the left. To make it go to the right, we add right, 0, semicolon. To move the element to the bottom right, we now add the bottom property and set the value to 0. To move it to the bottom left, we add the property of left and set the value to 0. This overrides the right property value pair, like how the top and bottom CSS properties override each other as well. This absolute element is currently free-flowing on the web page. Typically, we use absolute elements inside of relative elements so that we can control and predict the position of the absolute element. Let's create a div and give it a class of contain-e-absolute. Then place the e-absolute div inside of it. Let's give the class of contain-e-absolute styling. In our CSS file, we will give it a height and width of 600 pixels and a background of light blue. Even though we placed the absolute element inside of the container div, we can see how it is not actually being contained because of the way it is coming out of the top left edges of the container element. To further test this, if we position the absolute element to the bottom right, it goes to the bottom right of the web page and not to the bottom right of the contained element. To fix this, inside of our container elements, we need to add the property of position with the value of relative. Let's go over the basics in Advanced CSS with Grid and Flexbox. First, let's go over CSS Grid. In our HTML file, create a div with the class of grid-container. Inside, add 6 divs and name them numerically. In the CSS file, let's give the grid-container class the property of display and the value of grid. Then to set the layouts of the grid, we add the property of grid-template-columns and set the value to 1fr, 1fr, 1fr. 1fr stands for 1 fraction of the available space. Adding 3 1frs means that we want 3 equal columns. In CSS, the value of these 3 1frs is similar to setting the value to repeat parentheses 3, 1fr. These are just different value methods that equal the same thing. Now let's target each div inside of the grid-container by targeting the grid-container class, adding a greater than sign to target the direct child divs like so. We will set a padding of 25 pixels and a background of light blue. With CSS Grid, we can add spacing between columns and rows. For example, where the display grid property value pair is, let's add the property of gap and give it a value of 5 pixels. Let's add an H2 tag above the grid container code with the text of CSS Grid. This is just to organize these examples better. Now let's go over CSS Flexbox. Let's copy this code and paste it under it. Rewrite the pasted H2 tag to read CSS Flexbox, and instead of grid-container, put flex-container. In our CSS file, let's target the flex-container class and add the display property with the value of flex. This automatically positions the child elements of the flex container in a row direction. Let's also target the child divs by adding the flex container class and the greater than sign to target the direct divs. Then I recommend to add the box-sizing property with the value of border-box. This is to ensure a predictable and consistent layout. Then to set a row of 3 columns, we add the flex property with the value of 1, 0, and 33%. These are 3 separate values. The first value of 1 is the value for the flex grow property, meaning the item can grow to fill any available space along the main axis if necessary. The second value of 0 is the value for the flex shrink property. By setting 0, this means that the item cannot shrink beyond its initial size. And the third value of 33% means that the item will initially take up to 33% of the available space along the main axis. I set 33% because that is 1/3 of 100 for our goal to set the layout into 3 equal columns. We also want to set the flex-wrap property with the value of flex, where the display flex property value pair is, to ensure that it properly wraps within its container. Let's give each flex item a background of light pink, a padding of 25 pixels, and just like grid, we can use the gap property and set that to 5 pixels. As you can see here, we achieved the same layout using 2 different CSS layout systems. The primary distinction between CSS Grid and CSS Flexbox lies in the approach to design a layout. CSS Grid is designed for creating a more structured layout, whereas CSS Flexbox offers more flexibility in responsive design. In web development, it is common to use both systems separately or together within a web page, like using Flexbox within a CSS Grid item. Basics in Advanced CSS Responsiveness using Media Queries. In this lesson, I will go over how we use media queries to make HTML elements responsive within the browser. This is super important for creating a user-friendly website, whether the user is viewing on a smaller screen, such as a tablet or mobile device. To view a web page's responsiveness on our web browser, let's go to our Dev console. Click this device icon, and you can stretch the web page from this resizing tool on the right side. We can also click on responsiveness to see a drop-down of a specific device. To add or remove a device, we click on Edit and select or deselect any of these. Let's begin adding a media query to see how this works. But first, let's set the dimensions to iPhone 14 Pro Max at 75%. In the CSS file, at the very bottom, we type the @ media only screen, and add parentheses, and inside type max-width of 430 pixels. This means that we only want to change the styles that are set inside of the media query when the browser dimensions are from 0 pixels up to 430 pixels in width. Let's change the grid container class to have a row of 2 columns until the width of the browser goes over 430 pixels in width. We only want to target the property that we want to update for that class, and for this value, we will make it go from 3 columns to 2 columns. When we reload the page, we now see that it is 2 columns instead of 3. To further test this, we can resize the viewport and look at the width dimensions to make sure that it changes at the 430 pixel mark. There are several types of media query syntaxes that we can use for different cases. Another example is using min-width. We place this above the max-width. For this example, we will set it to 1800 pixels. Let's target the body's background color and set it to light green when the viewport has a width of at least 1800 pixels. Let's go to the browser and test this. It is good practice to separate the responsive CSS from the main CSS. We do this by separating the responsive code in its own style sheet. In VS Code, click the CSS folder, then click the file icon and name the file responsive.css. Inside the index file, we can copy the style sheet tag and paste it under the original style sheet. Rename the second style sheet to responsive.css. Then inside style.css, copy the media query code and paste it inside responsive.css. And you can test this again to make sure everything is connected and working as expected. Let's create a web developer portfolio website from scratch. By coding this single-page website ourselves, we'll gain a practical understanding of basic front-end web development. This hands-on approach will help us grasp fundamental concepts in HTML and CSS. After we finish coding the website, I'll show you how to check for any code errors, set up version control using GitLab, get it live by uploading it to a free server, and optimize it for better performance and ongoing maintenance. After downloading, simply move it to your desktop for easy access. Extract the course files folder and its contents by double-clicking the zip folder. Next, navigate to the guide CSS folder. To view the guides, double-click the HTML file to open it in your web browser. Alternatively, you can open it by dragging and dropping the HTML file onto your web browser window. Now let's look at the project files. In the Assets folder, click on the Design folder. Here you will find the design file and the portfolio website XD file as an extra. The XD file is not necessary, it's just here in case you're already using Adobe XD and want to open it there. I always like to take a quick look to analyze the design by thinking of where to place the nav, header, main, sections, and footer areas. In the Images folder, you'll find all the extracted images from the design. In the Video folder, we have the background video used in the website design. In the Fonts folder, we have all the fonts, but we are only going to use 1 or maybe 2 of these files. We can go ahead and close the folder, the browser window, and trash the zip folder. We will be using the course-files folder as our development folder. Open a new Google Chrome window and Visual Studio Code. In here, let's open the course-files folder and click on project-files to open it. Here we can see that the project files folder is open. Let's add a new file and name it index.html. In our HTML file, we can quickly add the HTML starter template by using a shortcut. Click to hold the Shift button, press the exclamation mark, and press Enter. We can change the spacing for our code by clicking the gear icon, going to Settings, search for Indent, scroll down to tab size. Here I will leave it at 2. I'm going to indent and add spacing to the code to make it more readable. Then we are going to install an extension called Live Server. Go here to Extensions, type Live Server. Click this one and install it. This extension allows us to launch a local development server with live reloading, which means that when the file is saved, it will automatically reload the browser to reflect the changes without needing to manually refresh the page. To activate this, click on Go Live. We can now view our HTML file locally as if it were live on the internet. To verify this, ensure that the page title is set to Documents as it appears in our HTML file in Visual Studio Code. Let's update the title to Portfolio Websites. When we save this, we can see that the page automatically reloaded to reflect this change. Now let's add a CSS folder. Inside, add a file and name it style.css. Then go to index.html and connect the CSS file with the link style sheet tag. Let's test that the CSS file is properly connected by giving the background of the body a color of light blue. Let's clear the styles. In our style.css file, we will add CSS variables. CSS variables are also known as CSS custom properties. The main reason why we use this is to set the same value for multiple properties. For example, if we want to set the same color to multiple properties, we can set a CSS variable as a value, and in case we want to change it to a different color, we only need to change that variable value instead of going through every value one by one in the style sheet. CSS variables are declared inside the colon root and can be accessed anywhere in the style sheet. Inside the declaration, the CSS variable is named by adding 2 dashes, the name, a colon, a value, and the semicolon. For example, here I will put 2 CSS variables, one for the color black and one for the color white. Next, we will add a universal selector. This is added by using the asterisk symbol. This selector applies to all elements within the document. Add a comma to add another selector. Combine the universal selector with the pseudo element for before and after. This is done by adding the asterisk, 2 colons, and the name of the pseudo element. Adding this is a common practice for setting consistent defaults across all elements in the project, helping achieve a more predictable layout and design. Let's add the box sizing property with the value of border box. Then add the same property value with the WebKit prefix. This prefix indicates that this property is specific to WebKit browsers like Safari and earlier versions of Chrome. Using a browser vendor prefix is just an additional step to ensure compatibility styling with older versions. These are not necessary in modern web development. To clean this up a bit, I will set each CSS selector on its own line. Now let's add the HTML selector and the body selector. Let's set an overflow-x of hidden. This is to prevent content from overflowing horizontally if it exceeds the viewport dimensions. Then add a padding of 0 and a margin of 0 to reset the default browser styling. Below the root declaration, let's add a font file. First, let's look for the font under Assets, open the font folder to view the font files. On our CSS file, let's add the font face role, which includes the @ symbol, followed by font-face, add the font family property with the value of the name of the font, wrapped in apostrophes. Add the src property with the value of URL, parentheses, add apostrophes, inside add a / to move out of the current directory and into the Assets folder. Target the Fonts folder, click on the Fonts name folder, and click the file to include its name. Then specify the format with the value of OpenType because that is the file type of the font file. We can include this font in our root declaration by giving it the variable property name of body with the value of the name of the font. On our HTML file, if we add an H1 of Hello Testing font, we will see that the font family is based on the browser's default styling. To set our custom font, let's go to the CSS file and in the HTML body declaration, add the font's family property with the value of the CSS variable of body. I actually want to use this font for the header, so let's rename the body variable to header. Copy and paste the font face declaration to add the thin font file. Add the CSS variable of body in the root with the name of the thinner font. Also, let's change the font family variable in the HTML body declaration to body. Let's remove the h1 tag and close the dev console for now. Close the fonts folder and let's look at the design. We can look at it in VS Code, but I prefer to view it on preview to easily switch from different windows. So let's minimize everything and open the design file from the course files folder. By looking at the design, I can see how I can structure it in HTML. We would start with the nav, which is at the top, and then the header. Let's open everything back up and organize our windows. In the HTML file, let's start coding the navigation by adding the nav tags. Inside, let's add a div with the class of container. This div will contain all of the nav elements. Add another div with the class of row. We will use this div to align the direct items in a row direction. The items will be two divs with the class of col. These will be two columns inside of the row. I add a hash inside just as a placeholder to see how the elements are structured on the front end. In the CSS file, let's add styling to the container class. Let's give it a width of 1600 pixels and a background color of light pink to test. 1600 pixels seems a little too wide. Let's change it to 1400 pixels. We can see that the element is aligned to the left because there is the space on the right. Let's align this to the center by adding a margin of auto. Then add a max width of 100% to make it responsive. We can go ahead and remove the background of light pink. Now let's give the class of row a style of display flex. Here we can see that the elements are aligned in a row direction. Let's target the divs with the col class directly from the row div like this. Let's give these flex items a styling of flex1 to make each div in equal size. In the first column div, let's add a div with the class of content-left and a placeholder text of email. In the second column div, let's add a div with the class of nav-links. Let's align the nav links to the right by going to the CSS file and target the nav tag. Add space and target the class of nav links, which is inside of the nav tag, and give it a property of text align with the value of right. Let's add this email icon with the email address within anchor tags. So when the user clicks on either or, it will open a new email message from the user's default email client provider. In here, you may add your own email address. Inside the href, add mail to, semicolon, and the email address. Let's add the email icon image. The email icon is there, but we cannot see it because the background color is the same color as the icon. Let's set the background color of the body selector to black. Also, let's set the color to white. This sets all the header and paragraph elements with a text color of white. To keep things consistent, let's rename nav-links to content-right. Always make sure to update the class name in the CSS file as well. Now I will be coding the nav area to match the design in real time. You may follow by coding along. At any time, feel free to adjust the speed of this video by clicking the gear icon on the lower right. Let's align the items in this row to the center of the container. In CSS, if we want to target an element with the class of .row that is located inside a nav element, we should use the selector nav space .row. This rule will apply styles to any .row elements that are descendants of a nav element. Let's also align the link inside of this row to the center of the container. We need to make sure it also has the display flex styling for this to work. In the previous CSS rule, we did not have to write display flex in that declaration because display flex is already set in the .row CSS selector above on line 41. Now let's style the email icon. I prefer to style the elements first in the Google Dev Console to preview how it will look before hard-coding it into the CSS file. This saves time on guessing and going back and forth on styling from the CSS file itself. Since this is the only image within the nav element and it does not have a set class, we can target that image instead of the nav element with the image selector like so. Here I will set the color of the link to white and remove the underline. Let's also give the nav a padding around it to match the design. Inside the content-right div, let's replace the placeholder with the actual navigation menu links. Adding the navigation links in a list view is one of many ways that you can add this. We will code this list so that it goes in a row direction instead of a column and add more styling to it. Let's keep coding along. We will give the last link a class of btn because we are going to style this as a button. For the navigation unordered list, let's remove the list styling and set it in a row direction. Let's move this to the right with the justify-contents property. Here we can remove the nav.content-right styling. For the navigation links, let's remove the default padding and set a gap between each list item to have a spacing of 50 pixels. Let's give the links a color of white and remove the text decoration. In CSS, we will specify this button by adding a .btn right after the anchor selector without spaces, so that it overrides any previous link styling. Let's add styling to this button to match the design. Here let's add spacing between the letters of 1 pixel to all the text in the body with the letter spacing property. Let's give the nav links a font size of 15 pixels. Let's also change the font family from thin to light. Now let's set styling for the button to look different when the user hovers it. In this code, notice that I added a colon with the text hover. This is a pseudo class for the selector, allowing changes to be applied when the element is hovered over with the cursor. On the hovered state, I want the background to be transparent and the color of the text to be white. Let's also add the transition property to ensure a smoother effect by making the change occur more gradually. The value of all 0.2s means that it will transition all of the elements inside within 0.2 seconds. Now we can move on to coding the header section. Below the nav element, we are going to use the header semantic tag. The items inside will be contained, so we will add a div with the class of container. Let's add another div inside with the class of content. Let's start by adding this image. Then let's add this line of text within span tags. Now let's add this h1 header text. Let's add a break tag after code with passion so that it will go on its own line. Adding a / to the href attribute will direct the user to the root of the website. In this case, the root is the index.html page. In the image tag, let's add the image by going to the Assets folder, then Images, then selecting the image file name. Let's give this image a class of profile-image. Let's style the header. First, we will add display flex. Set the height to 100 VH. This will take up 100% of the viewport's height. Let's take a look at this div by adding a background color of gray to see how it takes up 100% of the viewport height. For the content div, we can align everything to the center with the text align property. I would like the header to be flush to the top. We will set this by adjusting the CSS for the nav element. For the nav element, let's give this a position of absolute and a width of 100%. This is so that the header elements can be positioned at the top of the page and not below the nav. This span tag is naturally an inline element. We can change this to a block level element with the display property. That way it starts on a new line by going under the image element. Let's style the image by setting a width of 100 pixels and also set the height to auto to ensure that the element adjusts to its content, just in case the browser has any predefined measurements for that property. Let's also set a bottom padding of 25 pixels. Now let's make the H1 text bigger and give it a line height to match the design. The value for the line height property is set to 1.2. This value is a unitless number which acts as a multiplier of the font size. This means the line height is 1.2 times the font size. Here I'm going to copy and paste this code to create another button style. The styling to this button will be reversed, so instead of having a white background, it will be transparent with white text, and when hovered, it will have a background color of white with a text color of black. We also need to set the text decoration to none and add more padding to it. Now let's add this rotated text. Under the content div, we will add a div with the class of content-side and make this text a link. Later on, we will give the value an ID to make it scroll to the first section in the main element. For the header content CSS role, we are going to give this a position of relative because I actually want to move the content side div inside the content div so that I can align it to the left with a property of absolute. Actually, instead, I will move this after the content div and give the header elements a position of relative. Since I'm coding live and there are many ways to achieve the same design, in web development, it is natural in the creative process to keep adjusting things as needed to structure the site in the best way possible. To rotate the text, we are going to use the transform property with the rotate value. To add icons like this small arrow, we are going to import icons from the Bootstrap library. Go to icons.getbootstrap.com, search for arrow, copy the SVG code to insert it into the HTML file above the text. Let's give this a color of white and add the following styles. Let's set the opacity to 0.5 to make it dim, and when the user hovers it, it will become more opaque. Now I will show you how to add a background video. The video elements in HTML is used to embed video files into a web page. It allows us to include video content directly in the page, which can be played by users without needing to use external video players or plugins. Let's add the source tag inside the video elements and fallback text in case the user's browser does not support the video tag. In here, we will add the video file. Let's add these following attributes to the opening video tag to make the video keep autoplaying. To make this autoplay on mobile devices, also add the place inline attribute. And add a class of bg-video to add styling to it. While the placements of this class in the CSS file does not affect its functionality, I prefer to keep it organized in a way that reflects the HTML structure. This makes it easier to locate and manage the styles within the CSS file. This position of fixed will keep this element visible as I scroll on the web page. Let's set the height and width to 100%. Use Object Fit Cover to ensure the video displays properly, and apply a z-index of -1 to position it behind all the other elements. If we take a look now, the video is not displaying because we set a background color of black to the HTML body elements. Let's remove this background color so the video can show. Now let's add the main element with sections inside. Inside the main elements, I will treat each section as a component. For this first section, I will give it a class of s-01 and will keep this naming convention for the following sections. This section will be contained and have the h2 content inside of it. In this first section, we can copy and paste the text from the design file instead of typing it out. Then we will add CSS to style this section. Let's set each section to have a height of 100 VH with the display of flex. Now let's target the s-01 section component by targeting the class for the selector. This selector will have centered text and the following styles to match the design. Let's place this h2 style under the h1 style to help keep our classes organized. To code a bit faster in VS Code, you can set elements like this by typing section.s-02 and click Enter. Let's add these 3 boxes in that section. Inside of each col div, we will add a div for the box styles. They will each contain an h2 tag with the title of each box and an image right below it. In our CSS file, let's target each box with the .s-02 class and set the styling for the elements inside to match the design. Here, each box will have a certain width and will be positioned to the center with the margin of auto. Let's continue styling the boxes. For the boxes to match the design, we will add a linear gradient background with transparency using RGBA, and then add a blur background for a glass effect. Let's continue coding the next section. To follow our component naming convention, we will give this class a name of S-03. This is the portfolio section of the website. These are placeholders for the projects which you may update with your own. Let's add a div to contain the title area and add styling. You may wrap the image tag in an anchor tag so that when clicked on, it goes to that project. For now, I will just add the image tag. Let's style the H2 tag so we can add the horizontal line next to it with the pseudo element of after. The pseudo elements for the H2 tag will need the content property set to an empty string. Next, add the following CSS styles. It will have a height of 2 pixels and a width that adjusts to fit appropriately next to the H2 tag. For this line to be visible, we need to add a background color. Let's continue to make some more adjustments. Let's make sure to change the section from height to min height of 100 VH so that I can take the appropriate height space for the contents inside. This next section is styled similarly to the previous one, except the content aligns to the right. Let's style this section accordingly. Let's fix the Borstel typo. In our CSS, we can copy and paste this code and make adjustments to style it in a mirrored position. By updating the property of right to left, and text align the content to the right. This portfolio section is practically the same as the first portfolio section with minor adjustments. In the HTML file, we can copy the S-03 component for this section. Components are meant to be reusable HTML sections that may contain different contents inside but using the same styling. For this component, let's add a class for the title of title-line-spacing and override that after pseudo element to make the width fit the text. The last section in this main element will be the call to action area. Let's give this section a class of S-05 and add a container and content div inside with the H2 section title and a contact me link. We will align everything in this section to the center. Let's copy and paste this button styling and modify it to ensure the .btn class can be reused for multiple elements without requiring additional specificity. Under the main elements, we will add the footer area. We will use the footer semantic tag for this area, add the container div, add 3 anchor tags for each social media link, let's add a span tag with 2 forward slashes in between each link and an attribute of target with the value of _blank, so when clicked on, the page will open in a new tab on the same browser window. In our CSS file, let's start styling the footer elements. Now let's add the copyright info within paragraph tags. For the copyright symbol, we will use the bootstrap icon. Then add the year and the content. Let's make the text a little smaller and add some padding to the top. Here, let's add the social media links, and you can update them to your own. For the nav, I am going to add the z-index property with a value of 5, just to be extra sure that it overlaps all the other elements. Let's assign some of the sections with an ID so that the user can navigate to that section when a nav link is clicked on. On the first S-03 component, let's give this section an ID of my-work and then scroll up to the navigation menu, and inside of the href for my work, we will link this with the hash and the name of the ID. Let's add a simple smooth scrolling effect in the CSS file. We do this by targeting the HTML selector and adding the scroll behavior property with the value of smooth. For the Contact Me link, we will set the href attribute to the email address so users can send an email directly to that address. We will also add this to the Let's Connect link inside of the header section. For the Scroll to See More link, we will make it go to the first section in the main area. Let's add the intro ID name to the S-01 section. Here we will add a button for the mobile navigation. We will style it in CSS so that it appears on mobile view, and learn how to add functionality to it with JavaScript. Inside the mobile nav button, we will add a hamburger menu icon from the Bootstrap icon library. We can start adding the style for the menu icon in the style.css file, even though we will set it to appear in the mobile view later on. For the button class, I use a CSS selector with the class immediately following the button elements, without any spaces to ensure it specifically targets that class. For the hover state, I will add the property of cursor with the pointer value. Let's make this list item appear on mobile view only. In the style.css file, let's add a mobile-only class and give it a display of none so that it does not display on the page. Now we are ready to make this website mobile responsive. Let's make this website responsive with CSS media queries. In our CSS folder, let's add a responsive.css file. Link the responsive.css file to your index.html file right under the style.css file. Any CSS file added after the other will override those styles. Let's start by adding the media query for the iPad Pro view. Media queries begin with the @ symbol followed by media, and then add the following to define a min and max width of the browser's window. We can add CSS comments to CSS by starting it with a / sign and an asterisk with the comments inside and closing it with an asterisk and a / sign. Let's copy and paste this for the iPad media queries. Adding comments are not necessary but may be helpful to use as notes to ourselves and others for information about the code. Now let's add the media queries for the mobile landscape view. Now let's add the media queries for the mobile view. For this media query, we will use the media only screen for a max width of 559 pixels. Let's go to our Google Dev Console and click the device icon. We're currently viewing on an iPad Pro, which has a width of 1024 pixels. Feel free to adjust as needed. In the iPad Pro view, let's adjust the height of each section. In the responsive CSS file, it's best practice to only put the change property values inside of the media query that we want to apply the changes to. Let's keep making updates to the iPad Pro view. For the iPad view, I will add this device to the device list. We can start to see how the elements are starting to not fit appropriately within smaller viewports. Let's add CSS for the mobile menu to start appearing within these dimensions and below. In the iPad view, the navigation list items do not fit properly. Let's set their display to none and make the mobile menu appear instead. Let's keep making further iPad view adjustments. For this one, I will make the change in the style.css file because this styling is not specific to a certain viewport size. This approach helps to keep the CSS file more concise and reduces the number of lines needed in media queries. Since these two class selectors will have the same styling, we can just add them together like this. To combine multiple class roles to have the same styling, we just need to add a comma after each CSS role, and for best practice, place them each on their own line for better readability. Now let's style the mobile view. Let's copy and paste the same code for the nav menu in the mobile media query. For the scroll to see more section, let's adjust the code to fit better on mobile view. Let's move forward and code the sections in the main area. Let's adjust the global H2 font size. Here we will set this from display flex to display block. This will stack the boxes on top of each other and add margin to the bottom to separate the boxes. Change the background and set the padding and margin styles. Now let's style the portfolio sections. For the sections, we can set the min height to auto and adjust the padding. For these lines, we can create these differently for mobile view so that instead of having the lines on the side, we can add them to the top to create a division for each project section. We will use this same styling for the other portfolio section titles and continue to make further adjustments. Now let's adjust the portfolio section images. Let's add more padding to the last section. Let's go back and tighten up the styling. We can also take a look at the landscape view by clicking this icon. Let's update this header area in the mobile landscape media query. Set the height to auto of the container and add padding to let the elements breathe. Let's copy and paste this code inside the mobile landscape media query. Let's review the other views to make sure the elements are structured okay. Let's fully test responsiveness by adjusting the width and making the needed adjustments. Here we can see the header text is overlapping the other text. Also, the navigation items are distorted. Let's fix that. Let's copy this nav CSS styling for the mobile view and add it to the mobile landscape view. We also need to align these blocks into a column instead of a row. Let's copy and paste the mobile CSS into the mobile landscape media query right under the header CSS code. We can test landscape view and responsiveness again. I like to go over this multiple times to make sure that it is fully responsive. Now we can start working on the mobile navigation menu. In the index.html file, add a div under the nav element. This div will contain the items for the mobile nav menu. Let's rename this to mobile nav menu. Let's copy the nav menu list and paste it into the mobile menu nav. We can click this arrow to collapse the code and make it easier to copy. We can remove this last list item. Let's rename this to View Resume. We will make it for the user to view the resume instead of having it download on their mobile device. Above the menu list, let's add a button for the user to be able to close the mobile menu. And let's give it a class of close-menu and add a close icon. We will use the X icon from the Bootstrap icons library. Now let's style the mobile nav menu in the CSS file. We will start by giving it a background color of white to be able to see it better. Let's give the mobile nav menu a position of absolute to set it to the top right. Let's remove this btn class on the mobile nav menu. Now let's style the mobile menu. Let's target the Close button inside of the mobile nav menu by adding the mobile nav menu class. Add a space and then add the Close menu class. Let's add some padding to the mobile nav menu and style the elements inside. Here, let's remove the padding on the bottom and keep the padding for the list items. Here, I'm just going to move some code around. Let's add some styling to the links inside of the list items. In the style.css file, we are going to set a display of none to the mobile nav menu because we only want to display this on mobile views, and also only when the menu nav button is clicked on. Now we are going to add the mobile menu functionality with JavaScript. When the user clicks the hamburger element, the menu should toggle open. We will do this by toggling a class to open it, and the close icon inside of the menu will close the menu. Inside of the index.html file, scroll all the way to the bottom and right above the closing body tag, add the script tags. Inside here, we will write the JavaScript for the mobile nav menu functionality. Adding functionality with JavaScript. In front-end web development, it is very common to use JavaScript for document object model manipulation, for us to dynamically change the content, structure, and style of a web page in response to user interactions or other events. Inside the script tags, add the constant keyword by typing const. Give it a name of button and add the equal sign, then add the JavaScript method of document.querySelector. This will allow us to target elements from their CSS selector. Then add parentheses, then a single or double quotation marks. Target the mobile nav class by adding the period, followed by the class name of mobile-nav. Make sure it is closed with a semicolon at the end. Let's add another constant to target the mobile-nav- menu. When the button is clicked, we want it to do something. So add the button, then dot, and the method of addEventListener. Following parentheses, inside we will add two arguments. Let's add single quotes with the word click inside. This will make the browser listen for the click events, and the following function will define what will happen after the element is clicked. After the click argument, type a comma and write the function by typing function, following parentheses, and add a space, and then add curly braces. Inside the curly braces, we will target the menu after the button is clicked and toggle a class dynamically by adding menu.classList.toggle. Add parentheses, quotation marks. The class name that we will toggle is open, then close that line with a semicolon. Now in our CSS file, let's target the class name of open. This will dynamically appear in the class property value next to mobile-nav-menu. Then add the CSS property value of display block to show the menu. And this is not working because I did not put the correct class name. Let's go back to fix that. Now let's also add the logic to close the button. Let's go back to index.html. Inside our menu JavaScript code, let's add another constant and name it close button for the .close- menu element. Let's clean this up a little bit better here. Under this code block, we will add another for the close functionality. We will add similar logic, except instead of toggle, we will use remove because the only intention for it is to close the menu. This ensures that the menu will be closed when this button is pressed, no matter what the current state is. Let's test this out. Since the links inside of the menu are anchors to specific sections of the web page, we also want to make sure that the menu closes after clicking any of the menu links. Let's add that logic by adding another constant to target the links inside of the menu by using query selector all. The difference between query selector and query selector all is that query selector targets only the first element with the specified selector, and query selector all targets all of the elements with that specified selector. Under the close button code block, we will add the code to target each menu link by writing links dots for each following parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we will target each link inside of the links array with the word link, add a space, then add the arrow function, which consists of the equal sign following the greater than symbol, add a space, add curly braces, and add a space in between. Now add logic so when a link is clicked, it will remove the class of open. In this code block, the for each is a method called on the links collection that iterates over each element in the links array, each link or anchor tag inside of the mobile nav menu. Now let's test that it works. Clicking a link will successfully go to the section we anchored it to with the corresponding ID name. Then it will close the menu thereafter. This makes the user experience flow a lot better. Let's organize our code by adding the JavaScript code inside of its own file. Let's create a folder and name it JS. Inside, create a file called custom.js. Copy the code inside of the script tags and paste it inside of the file. In the index.html file, right above the closing body tag, we will add the script tag that connects to the custom.js file. This consists of the script element with the src attribute in the opening body tag that connects to the JS folder and the custom.js file. Now we're ready to validate our HTML to test our code for any errors. In the browser, we will open a new tab. In the search bar, type HTML validator and click this one by W3C. We can test HTML by entering the web page link, by file upload, or by direct input. Let's click on validate by file upload and click on choose file and navigate to the index.html file. Click open, then click on check. Here we see that there are no errors to the HTML file, but let's see what happens if we create an error in our HTML file. For example, let's remove the O in the video element. Let's upload the file again. Now we can see the errors on the document. The HTML validator is a useful tool to check for syntax errors and structural issues to help improve the quality and reliability of your web pages. At any time, you can always check your HTML on validator.w3.org/new. Let's go over how to upload your website files to GitLab. GitLab is mostly used in teams to track changes to a website with version control. It is also a place where you can store all of your web projects and make it private or public. Let's go to our course-files folder and rename project-files to dev-portfolio. Then click to drag it into the desktop for easier access. I am also going to put away my course-files folder. Let's open the Chrome browser and in the search bar, type in gitlab.com. I am going to sign in to my account. To create an account, click on the Register Now link below the Sign In button and follow the easy steps to create your account. Once you are logged in, click on the plus symbol on the upper left-hand side to create a new project. Click on Create Blank Project. Under project name, I will name this dev-portfolio. You can name this anything you want. You can also rename this later on. Under project URL, I will make sure it is under my account. Then scroll down and click on Create Project. We will be uploading our web project files to GitLab by using the terminal. The terminal can feel a little scary at first, but do not overthink it. I will go over it step by step. In the GitLab project, click on the Code button, then click on the Copy URL icon to clone with HTTPS. Then on your computer, navigate to your terminal. On Mac, it will look like this. Click to open it. If you are using Windows, go to Windows Search, search for Terminal, and select Windows Terminal from the search results. In the terminal, type ls to view the contents of the current directory. For Windows, type dir. This is where we will put the GitLab project. Type git clone and paste the link that we had copied in GitLab, then press enter. You may be prompted to log into GitLab from the terminal. Type ls again, and now you should be able to see it listed here. Now let's go into that directory by typing cd dev-portfolio. We can see that we are now in that directory because dev-portfolio is set on the terminal line. Let's create a new branch by typing git branch. You can name this branch anything you want, just make sure it is relevant. I will name it static-files and press enter. Now that the branch is created, we will go to it by typing git checkout static-files. The terminal lets us know that it switched to the branch. We can navigate to that folder by clicking an area in the desktop, then click the top bar, click on Go, click on Home, click on the project folder. In here you will see the README file because that is what we have in our GitLab project. Now we will copy the folders and files from the web project we created locally and paste it into this GitLab project folder. We can then delete the dev-portfolio folder on the desktop. Going back to the terminal, let's check to see that the project folder has everything we pasted in by typing git status. Let's add these changes to the branch by typing git add --all. Then let's commit these changes by typing git commit -m quotation marks and add a message to describe the update. Here I will put static file upload and press enter. Then type git push. We will copy and paste this git push line to create the upstream branch in GitLab. Now we can create a merge request for the branch that we created by copying this link from the terminal and pasting it in our browser. Now we're on the web page to create the new merge request. This is to be able to push changes to the web project repository. If you are working with a team, make sure to communicate with them on how to handle version control updates. Under Assignee, I will click Assign to Me so that I'm able to approve the changes. Then click on Create Merge Request. Now let's click on Merge to push these changes. Let's view the project by clicking on Dev-Portfolio here. When we want to make future changes on the latest version, we will need to pull these changes into our local repository. On the terminal, we will create a fresh view here by entering the clear command. For Windows, the command is CLS. I typed ls, not realizing I was already on the right directory. Let's go to the default branch by typing git checkout main. Here we see that the branch switched to main. Then type git pull to get the newly updated branch. GitLab branches are separate lines of development within a repository. It allows for multiple developers to work on different areas without affecting the main code base. Each branch contains its own changes, allowing you to work on features independently. Even though this is a one-person course project, it is essential to learn version control just in case you do work with other developers on GitLab. Let's find and open the GitLab repository in the terminal. And type git pull every time before creating a new branch. This is to be sure that you are working on the most updated version of the codebase. For this update, we will add a .gitignore file to the GitLab repository to specify which files should be ignored and prevent them from being added to the web files. For example, the .ds_store file is a hidden file automatically generated by macOS, and it is not needed in the web project. If you are using Windows, you can follow these steps to manage any automatically generated files or any unwanted files. Name the branch add_gitignore. Then switch into the branch with git checkout add_gitignore. Let's open the web project in Visual Studio Code by typing code space period. We can close these tabs. To create a file, instead of clicking the file icon at the top, we can also right-click and select New File. Name the file .gitignore. In here, type the name of the file that we want GitLab to ignore. To add any additional files, you may add them on their own line. In the terminal, we can check these changes by typing git status. dsstore actually has a capital S, so I will make that change in the file now. Let's check the status again. To add these changes into the branch that we just created, type git add --all. Then add a message to the update by typing git commit -m quotation marks, and the message goes inside of the quotation marks. For this one, I will put add gitignore. To submit these changes to the branch, type git push. Then copy this line and paste it into the terminal. To create the merge request, we can copy this URL and paste it into the web browser. I will leave the title as is. Let's assign this request to ourselves. If you're working with others, you may need to assign this to someone else to review it. Then click Create Merge Request. You should see the request is ready to merge, meaning there are no conflicts. Then click on Merge. You can also view the merge details and add comments if needed. Let's go back to the repository. Here we still see the ds-store file because that was from the previous commit. We can delete it from here, and when we add a new update, this file will be ignored and it won't be added to the repository again. We can go back to the terminal and pull the new changes to make sure we are working on an updated codebase. Learn how to add CSS animations with the Animate on Scroll library. I am already in the project folder in the terminal. To be extra sure that I am on the updated main branch, I will type git checkout main, then git pull. Let's make a new branch called CSS-animations. Let's switch into the branch. Let's open it in our code and go to the index.html file. This is where we will add the Animate on Scroll animation using a lightweight library by Mikhail Snik. In the browser, let's open a new tab and search for AOS CSS. AOS is short for Animate on Scroll. Sorry, everything is in Thai because I'm currently in Thailand. I'll switch it to English here. Let's click this first one to preview all of their animations. As the user scrolls down, the elements will animate when they are scrolled down into view. We can click on the GitHub kitty. GitHub is also like GitLab, where they are both web-based platforms for version control using Git, with differences in hosting options, UI, experience, and more. Let's scroll down to installation and click this clipboard icon to copy this code and paste it into the head above the other CSS tags. Then we need to copy this code and paste it right before the closing body tag. Now let's take a look at the examples. We will copy this data, AOS attribute, and the fade-up value, and paste it on this div to see what it will look like. For some reason, Live Server is not installed, but no worries, I will check and install it again. Click on Go Live. Now we see how the animation did a fade up on the content div. We can also make the transition slower by adding the data AOS duration. 5000 is the slowest and 0 is the fastest. Let's try a fade-in duration set to 1000. I am going to copy this so that it only shows for the h1 tag instead of the entire content div. I will use this for the other areas of the page as well. Feel free to set it any way you would like. Let's go back to the web page and see how the animations look. Let's go in the terminal and check the status of the project. Let's add the changes to the CSS Animations branch. Add a message for the commit. Push the changes and create the branch. Then continue the process to merge these changes into the repo. It is now time to go live with Render Free Hosting. On the browser, open a new tab and go to render.com. You can easily sign up by clicking on Get Started. You can create your account linking your GitLab account or any of the other options here. I created mine by linking GitLab already, so I will go ahead and sign into Render. Here, I will click to authorize Render for GitLab. Then on the dashboard, on the top right, click on New. Select Static Site. Click on the Dev Portfolio web project and click Connect. I will leave the name as is, then scroll down to Publish Directory and type / in the inputs field, then click on Deploy Site. Render will automatically build and deploy your project on its infrastructure, which includes free and paid server options depending on your configuration. Render.com offers a free tier for hosting static sites. When the build is complete, you will see a message saying, "Your site is live." It will be hosted at an auto-generated URL. Let's click on it to view your website live. Let's learn how to optimize our web page by testing it with PageSpeed's Insights. PageSpeed's Insights is a tool developed by Google to analyze the performance of a web page and provide insights on how to improve it. We will use this tool to enhance the speed and user experience of a website. Copy your web page URL, then open a new tab and search PageSpeeds. Click this first one and enter the web page URL in here, then click Analyze. It may take a minute to run the analysis. Anything 90 and above is considered pretty good. When we scroll down to the diagnostics, there will be a list of ways to improve the web page, and clicking the accordion will give you details. Let's take a look at the desktop. The score is almost perfect. Let's click on SEO. It says here that the document does not have a meta description. We can click here to learn more. Providing a meta description is important for SEO as it provides a short but general information about the web page. This description often appears in the search engines below the page title. A meta description is also useful for an improved click-through rate, help with rankings, and overall SEO effectiveness. Let's open the terminal and navigate to the web portfolio. Let's create a branch to add the meta description. We will add the meta description inside of the head elements below the other meta tags. I will keep this short and type Jan Web Developer Portfolio. Let's save that and go back to the terminal. Check the status and proceed with creating the branch. Before merging, you can also look at the changes by clicking on the Changes tab. Let's go to Render, click Dashboard, and you can see that it is deploying the newest changes made to that repository in GitLab. It can take a minute for the changes to go live. Once it is done, we can make sure the meta description is added by going to the site. Right-click to view page source, and there it is. Let's run the page speed test again. Mobile view still has room for improvements, whereas desktop has a perfect score of 100. For further practice, you can try to make improvements on the mobile view. Let's add a download feature for the resume. The feature will allow the user to download the resume if they are on desktop, but if they are on mobile, then it will open in a new tab instead. On Mac, you can create a resume on Pages. Alternatively, you can use Google Docs. Let's do a quick example on Mac by clicking the Launchpad and clicking Pages. Click on any of the resume templates here. You may skip this step if you already know how to create a resume PDF or if you already have one. You can fill this out with your own information. Then when you are finished, we will export it in PDF by clicking on File, then Export to, and select PDF. Then click Save. I will name it Resume. We can close this and go to our terminal. Let's go into the main branch and make sure to pull the new changes. Create a branch called add_resume and switch into that branch. Let's open it in Visual Studio Code. Here we will add the resume in the links for the resume. First, let's add the resume file in the projects folder. For this download resume link, we will add the download attributes. This will tell the browser to download the file when the user clicks on this link. Now let's scroll to the mobile menu, add the resume file, and add the target attribute with the value of _blank. When the user clicks on it, it will open in a new tab in the user's browser. In the terminal, let's check the status and proceed with merging this update. Once it is finished deploying, let's go to the website and test the download link. When I click Download Resume, I can confirm that it downloaded to my Downloads folder. Now let's check Mobile View. Right-click to inspect. Select any mobile device. When you click View Resume, it should open in a new tab on the current browser. This is how to add a resume. Make sure to update it with your own. Congratulations for reaching the end of this course. Below, I have provided coding resources for you to check out. If you've enjoyed this course and want to dive even deeper into web development, I would love to invite you to join my one-on-one coding mentorship program. In this exclusive program, you'll get hands-on guidance and support as you work on real-world projects that you can keep and add directly to your portfolio. If you're ready to invest in yourself and accelerate your web development journey, click below to upgrade for the mentorship program. I can't wait to work with you and help you achieve your goals.